KCRW sponsors include A24, presenting Moonlight, a film chronicling 3 chapters in the life of a young black man discovering his identity and experiencing first love as he moves from childhood into manhood. In theaters now.
Hey, I'm Josh Barrow, your new host of Left, Right, and Center. Every week, join Rich Lowry, Bob Scheer, and me for a contentious yet civilized debate of the week's big political stories, from ISIS to the U.S. economy to this 47-candidate presidential election we're having. You can find Left, Right, and Center on KCRW's iTunes page.
From KCRW Santa Monica and KCRW.com, it's The Treatment. Welcome to The Treatment. I'm Elvis Mitchell. If you watch network TV, you've probably seen, I don't know, How to Get Away with Murder or Empire. Well, when it comes to cable, there tends to not be as much interesting program with black protagonists. Starz has broken that with the show Power, which is in its 2nd season. Its creator and executive producer, Courtney Kemp Agboh, is sitting across from me. I'm so happy to have you here.
It's nice to be here.
And what I really like about the show, and just knowing a little bit what you've done, is really about sort of the dangers, the evils of capitalism.
It's so funny. I think of it as being about spiritual struggle.
It's also about the thing my grandmother used to say to me, beware the things you want, for you shall have them.
Yes. I definitely think that, so much of my reading, so much of the philosophy behind the show comes from a book called The Sermon on the Mount, which is by Emmett Fox. And one of the things that he says in there is that if you decide what you want, and you could be the kind of person who can bring that about, and then if you are that kind of person, then you will have to deal with the consequences.
I guess I think about this too, because so much of the show is, let's tell the audience what it's about. It's an upwardly mobile black couple, James and Tasha St. Patrick, who seem to be living the life that, you read about in magazines, and they appear in magazines. Mm-hmm. He runs a very successful club. He's married, has 3 beautiful children. Mm-hmm. His mother-in-law's in the house with him, but he's married a younger, beautiful woman, and his best friend is in business with him. Their business is this club and these laundromats, except we find out that James is really a major player in the drug trade named Ghost, who nobody knows who he is except his real intimates, basically his wife and his best friend, Tommy. Mm-hmm. And a woman appears, Angela, from his past life, the woman who the girl who got away, literally the girl who got away in high school. Yeah. And she's reappeared in his life as basically a cop who's out to trap this mysterious drug dealer named Ghost.
Yes. And
just what's so much fun about the show is that it's a show in which black people sort of get to dictate their own lives. And what I think when I think about the title Power is the way you choose to exercise the power you have in your life, which is not often something that people of color get to do.
Well, it's interesting because, again, the philosophy behind that title is really about powerlessness. It's really about this idea that Ghost thinks he has all this power, and then things keep crashing into his life and taking him off course. So, for example, he might have operated this way with impunity for years, except that Angela walks into the club, and then she happens to be a federal prosecutor who happens to be looking to indict Felipe Lobos, who is his boss. So, and she's looking for, as you said, this mysterious distributor. She doesn't know the name Ghost when she first meets him, but then over time, she learns the name Ghost and doesn't know that it's her boyfriend, Jamie. So, yes, the lead...
See, that duality, because with her, he's Jamie. With his wife,
he's Ghost. Yes, absolutely. And there's actually a third persona. When I talk to Amari about it, it's really...
Amari Hartwick, who plays James.
Yes.
Ghost.
It's very much 3 characters. It's Jamie, who is the person that Angela knows, the 15-year-old self. It's James, who's the sort of upwardly mobile black enterprise businessman in the suits. And then there's Ghost, who is a murdering drug dealer. And all 3 of them are parts of him. What he believes is that he's really James and Jamie, and that Ghost is something that he put on in order to survive and succeed. As we continue through the series, we'll realize just how much the Ghost persona is necessary,
Well, it's so much about, for me, the kinds of faces, if you're a person of color, the kinds of things you have to do to negotiate. You have to take on these different identities anyway. And to place that in this life and death situation just really sort of brings to the fore how wrought a situation often is for people of color negotiating those kinds of worlds.
Well, this is an extreme example of dual consciousness,
what you're
as
getting at
described by W.E.B. Du Bois. Exactly, that we are really taking that and pushing it to its extremes. And I think that we use certain characters, like the Simon Stern character played by Victor Garber, to show what kinds of overt and covert racism you have to deal with in the business world, right?
And we should say that that character, Simon Stern, again, who basically wants to support James' club and basically pretends to be a partner, but really takes over the club.
I would say that Stern is a foe who at first, Ghost, in the first season, is really excited by this idea that this man has taken an interest in him.
It's respectability.
Yes, exactly. It's respectability. It's a hallmark of success. Then he realizes that what the man wants to do is basically steal his skills, appropriate them, bring them onto his plantation in a way.
Yeah, absolutely.
And then, James says, no, I will not be appropriated. I will not be taken over. And in the second season, I don't want to spoil anything for people who are first catching up, but in the second season, he realizes that the way power works among people like that, it's so high above his head that he couldn't see Stern's moves coming because he's not as experienced in that world. He would have been able to anticipate the moves of another drug dealer.
Let me ask you this, because I think part of it, too, is he makes himself willfully naive. He wants to believe that somehow this world, as represented by Stern, is different than the world he comes from. He wants to believe that there are scruples involved there, that you have to... He's forgotten the great line from Balzac, behind every great fortune is a crime.
Well, I think he definitely has a very black and white view of what's good and what's bad. And I think he is a gangster. I think we see that throughout the season 2. I think we see
more of it in season 2.
We see more. We see him learn to adapt the skills he knows from the street into the sort of the club world. But, Ghost, much like I would say EP 50 Cent, 50 Cent is a really great businessman on a lot of levels. He didn't go to Wharton. He could have. If he had had the education that I have, if he had had the opportunities that I had, he would have gone to Wharton. He's that kind of business mind. At the same time, though, when you have to learn that on the streets, you learn a different kind of stakes that goes along with it. So what I think is always interesting is that Ghost cannot just kill Simon Stern, because that's not the way that works in the business world. You actually can't just roll up with a gun. So how are you going to handle it,
It's the truth. We're talking epistemology with the creator of Power, Courtney Kemp Agboh. The show's on Starz in its second season, just been picked up for a third. But I always find that there's an interesting thing that happens to James when he starts speaking Spanish. I mean, he takes on the tenor of the room, if you will. If he's dealing with Angela and he's speaking Spanish with her, that's one thing. If he's talking to the people in the drug world, he becomes another person. What I find so interesting about this is one of the reasons he seems to be so tortured is I don't think he knows who he is.
Well, I think he is playing a game almost all the time about who he is. He's always playing a part. He's rarely himself. I mean, I think that's the thing that Angela represents, is that when he's with her, he can sometimes, especially in season 1, kind of drop most of the act, except that he's hiding from her that he's a major drug dealer, of course.
Well, there's that.
Like you do. But the Spanish is also, again, really illustrating, going right at the W.E.B. Du Bois, dual consciousness, dual languages. He's bilingual. Part of his bilinguality is specifically arranged so that he can always control his space, and that in his various relationships, he is not being caught unaware. There's a contrast between him and Tommy. Tommy doesn't speak Spanish. Now, Tommy came from the same place he did. If you grew up in the tri-state area at that time period, if you grew up in Queens, you should know some Spanish. How come Tommy can't adapt and figure that out? Well, that's because he doesn't have to.
But also, I think, interestingly, to me, it feels almost Shakespearean that Tommy is true to himself. I mean, to me, Ghost really suggests Macbeth.
Well, he was meant to. He was meant to suggest Macbeth. Tasha was meant to suggest Lady Macbeth. But he also, as you'll see over time, has some Othello qualities as well.
But there's definitely a Banquo's Ghost here.
Yeah. I would say that, again, there's so much of it that's Shakespearean. As we work through the season and we talk about We talked a lot this year when we're doing season 3 because we're already breaking.
You start off
season
with
3.
Romeo and Juliet.
Yeah.
The romance between James and Angela.
We absolutely did start with Romeo and Juliet, and at the same time Macbeth. Right, both things happening at the same time.
Let me ask you this then: what was the pitch like when you went into Stars? What did you say the show was?
I really said the show was about powerlessness. I really went in to talk about someone who was a liar and who was, struggling to change himself. I really thought that it was something about, in the specific, right? In the specific, it's about a black man who was sold the lie that we all were sold, which is you can never be president. There's only so far you can go. Now, that's a lie. We all know that's a lie now, but we didn't at that time. The ghost character's 35, so he's a little younger than I am. Omari is 40, 41. And so he's a little older, but this idea, of course, that there's a ceiling. And so instead of going the legit route, which would have been risk and taking on huge educational debt and all those things, he decided to go the street route because he couldn't get anywhere. Okay, so that's part of what it is. In the real of it, it's about some very universal themes. It's about the one that got away. It's about, does my past dictate my future? It's about, can I actually change who I am? And ultimately gets to a question of who am I, which is, I think, is what we grapple with every day.
But there's an interesting thing too that I feel it's so much about both the promise of the 90s and the barriers of the 90s. I mean, he's almost a casual. The show is really about, another way too, about casualties of the 90s. I mean, Kanan is definitely, I told you when you sat down, one of my favorite things when he shows up, he's wearing this Pele jacket, and then eventually he's drinking an OE40. I mean, and that's definitely a character out of Shakespeare, Kanan.
Oh, yeah. Well, but the thing is, having 50 as an EP, we got to create that.
He's the guy who was in, basically we find out, I don't want to give away how he ended up in prison, but we find out that he's one of James' old boys, one of his boys from the old days. Not
even just his boy, but his older brother, his mentor, the guy who taught him the trade. I mean, so there's
and he's taken on Kanan's son as his driver and aide de camp.
Yes,
I mean, that's very much like a Shakespearean kind of figure, having this guy as your soldier in waiting.
I have to say, I feel like you figured out the whole show. So, I mean, all the different. No, it's true. I mean, there's no reinventing the wheel. I'm telling this story. It's just that the people who are playing these parts have browner skin. But we were always capable of telling these stories, of always being these stories. I just think that it's, not to take ourselves too seriously, but the complexity of these characters, the fact that they can be more than one thing, that's on purpose. It's purposeful that we try to show all these different colors and to set up these very Shakespearean things. My father died in 2011, and much of the show is about that relationship I had with my dad. So much of the show is about black fathers and sons, and about older brothers as well. I have an older brother. And just all of these different, elements that go into those relationships. Now, some of that is Shakespearean. Shakespeare does a lot with fathers and sons. But some of that is also, I add the layer of race, because there is a specific element to that, and class. My dad, when he was alive, my dad was very, very poor growing up. He was the son of a sharecropper, and then they had moved to Buffalo, New York. And my dad was the eldest of 7. He was the only boy. There were 6 girls. My dad and his sister, the eldest of the sisters, Helen, used to dance on the street for money, for extra change. He got older. He went to Morgan State on a basketball scholarship and then went to Amos Tuck Business School at Dartmouth, and was the first black man to graduate from Dartmouth. Not the first one to go, but the first one to graduate. So in one generation, my dad went from dancing on the street to an Ivy League business school. He was exceptionally, exceptionally smart, but he never left.
Oh, talk about vertigo.
Yeah. Well, okay. So he never left that insecurity and that feeling of being, someday someone's going to find out, someone's going to tap you on the shoulder and say imposter. He had a hard time relating to my brother in that way. My brother was born to upwardly mobile parents who had, room to spare, 2 cars, whatever. And he had a hard time relating to that, that class schism in one generation. So that's one of the things that we want to play with Ghost going forward. He has this son, Tariq, who is growing up in the penthouse with 9 different devices. You know what I mean? He's got an iPad and an iPhone, and he's got, all these different video game systems, and he's got the flyest, newest kicks. We have a background story for Ghost about his bike getting stolen and how that was it. It wasn't getting a new one. Bike's gone. It's gone.
I'm sorry, we have to take a break. There's way too much ground to cover here. We're talking about Power and the show Power with the series creator, Courtney Kemp Agboh. It's a treatment. There's more to come. I'm really excited. Stay with us.
This podcast is produced by KCRW, a nonprofit public radio station based in Santa Monica. KCRW is listener-supported. Help us continue to create and distribute our unique content. Go to kcrw.com/join to donate. And thanks.
Welcome back. I'm pixelated from talking about the Starz series Power, which is in its second season. Just got picked up for a third. The show's creator and executive producer, Courtney Kemp Agboh, sitting with me. I just find what's so fascinating about, again, there's the idea of sort of placing this in the context of people who, to use a phrase that Ball would use, are sort of crippled with survivor's guilt.
I wouldn't say, I don't think Ghost has he's not a sociopath, but I think that his survivor's guilt is not pure. Right? Because he did what he did to survive on purpose. A lot of times great men who come from nothing or who have lost everything and become something, they don't have that guilt because they worked for it. Instead, what they have is a little bit of arrogance that they will always be able to make it work. And we see this in Ghost. Ghost always thinks he can make it work.
But we really see it in Ghost. I don't know if we see it in James. But we're talking about these identities.
Yeah.
That we see it in Ghost.
Yeah.
I mean, there is an understanding of, as we'd say here in the 21st century, he's very goal-oriented. He knows what he
Yes,
wants and he goes after it.
Exactly. He's always goal-oriented. And one of the things that we use on the show, you'll see a lot, is we'll hold a shot and Ghost will walk out of the shot. Instead of us going with him, Ghost will walk out of the shot. There's a specific reason because we always want to keep him in motion.
One of the things I got to say, too, we're sounding pretty lofty here. We're making it sound like this is one of these shows you have to do a lot of reading for. It's high drama. It's melodrama.
Oh, it's totally melodrama. And we burn through story like you wouldn't believe.
I just said to you before we sat down, I can't believe where we are now. This is the kind of thing I figured you're basically revealing things I thought would be saved up until the third season or something.
Well, here's the thing. Starz, they definitely gave me notes like, why don't you slow down? And I said, because the audience now doesn't want you to slow down. The audience now needs that.
When did you come to that conclusion?
First of all, I come out of broadcasts. You chew through more story in broadcast. There's this whole thing about cable, how you can just sort of sit and not do anything for a while. And I think it's super lame. I think it's super boring. I get bored out of my mind by watching nothing happen. And there are certain television programs that everyone in the Academy loves that are not full of happening. Listen, I love Woody Allen, and I really love, Dangerous Liaisons is one of my favorite movies. It's also one of my favorite books.
It's also soap opera.
It's all
and betrayals of confidences.
Exactly.
And shifting of alliances.
And you can have high art that is really exciting and really interesting. You know what I mean? I don't think watching nothing happen is exciting. And I don't always think that. I think that's a tone poem. I don't know that that's television. So it's TV. I had a hard day at work. I don't want to have to think about ice cubes melting in a glass. I want to see drama. I want to see happening. I want things to take place in the series. That's me. That's my preference. And listen, on The Good Wife, I was there for 3 years. Stuff happens.
But it was almost, again, on The Good Wife, it really was like, let's see how many hoops we can make these people jump through and how much story we can burn through.
Exactly. And that's where I come from. Robert and Michelle, really, Robert's sense of storytelling, Michelle's sense of storytelling is, okay, so that happened. What next? And I really feel like that too.
It's funny that you said, because one of the things I was going to ask you about that, just because that household, the St. Patrick household, is kind of like the household in The Good Wife, where we don't know where the alliances are, who the innocent is, because it shifts from one half of the season to the other.
A perfect example of how we do innocence on Power is Tommy. Tommy's one of the most innocent characters we have.
I don't know if he's innocent, but he's the purest.
He's the purest. He does not lie. He is straightforward, and he's honest, and he's loyal. We're going to see a lot of different changes. But when we talk about burning through story or having high drama or having melodrama and things like that, yeah, that's satisfying TV to me. For me, it's just my taste, you know? And again, like I said, Star is very much in the early part where like they said to me, can you slow it down? And I was like, not so much. Not really. I mean, we can slow certain elements down. What we call it in the writer's room is pushing right, like pushing events right, you know, down into the season. But my natural feeling is that we call them in the writer's room, oh shizzle moments. You want about 4 or 5 of those in an episode. You want a large number of oh shizzle moments. You want the audience to go, oh my God, I can't believe that happened. And then you maybe give them a couple scenes that are quieter, and then you pull them, literally grab them by the throat and pull them through the episode.
Well, here's one of the things that really links this to the way network TV works, because you don't have act breaks. What you do have that you have network TV is you end episodes with cliffhangers.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, every episode...
I'm old school, yeah.
Every episode that I've seen up to this part in the second season ends on a cliffhanger.
Yeah, I believe in it. I believe in some of the old school tricks. You know, it's like I still pin curl my hair. In other words, I believe in the old school. The old ways are best. And so sometimes, you know, I mean, I pin curl my hair, I'm wearing a slip, and I believe in a cliffhanger. You know what I mean? And I believe in, you know, not giving everybody full information. You know, I believe in shifting the audience at the last minute, you know, telling them something that they didn't see coming. I believe in all those tricks. They work. I don't know why people have moved away from them. I don't understand it. Everyone's storytelling is different, and I respect everyone's storytelling. I really do. But some of the things, like I'll give you an example, some of the things that like Vince Gilligan did in Breaking Bad, I mean, he believed in the shock. He believed in shock. Yes, that's what we should be doing in TV. Because why are you coming back? Why are you coming back? Do you know what I mean? Like, ultimately, it's not a movie. It's not one experience. You know, it's a series of experiences.
But in talking about some of these things, too, I mean, even though the show is dealing with relatively states of power or proximity to power,
Mm-hmm.
at least that's what it feels to me, rather than powerlessness, how close you are to the center of it and what you do when you're close to that center. The idea, you know, it's still a shocking thing. We're in the 21st century now. The idea of black people being sexual in a show, it's a remark.
Well, I don't understand why that is. That's the thing that's sort of surprising to me is like, is that really that interesting? I will tell you this, though. When we started casting the show, there were numbers of black people, especially women, who would not do the nudity.
Yeah?
Mm-hmm. People who walked away from the part of Tasha, definitely.
Wow.
People who walked away from Ghost because they didn't want to do the nudity.
Like, this is interesting. You have an actress who played a Playboy bunny and was in a Playboy club.
Mm-hmm.
So yeah, it makes sense that she would do this. But
well, I mean, I think here's the thing. What I would say is that was not nudity. I mean, that was network television, the Playboy Club. It's, you know, I mean, I think Naturi is a fearless actress in other ways that have nothing to do with nudity. I actually rewrote the part for her because the part was supposed to be 35. She was supposed to be the same age as Tommy. And goes, and when Naturi came in and auditioned, I rewrote the part to be younger. I changed the ages of the kids. I did everything to make it her. It had nothing to do with nudity. It had to do with the fact that in her audition, Omari really went for her. It was a fight scene, and she came roaring back. She was not afraid.
She is a Shakespeare woman.
Yeah, she's an amazing woman, and I think that
she's Lady Macbeth.
She's Lady Macbeth, and
we're really seeing it now in the second season.
And Leela, who plays Angela, same thing, unafraid. These are fearless women, and that to me is why those women were cast. I was just saying about sexuality with people of color that the fear of doing it. I mean, I think there was an article that said that Wow Power is the only show that's showing this. And I also want to say that we ourselves as people of color seem to have figured out a prohibition against it that we're holding on to as well.
That's interesting because I just find, I mean, I don't know if we can say it's inertia or institutional racism, but this idea, again, we're talking about the word power, not just the title of the show. If you make characters sexual, you're giving them power. You're giving them basically...
You're making them human.
Which is giving them power, which is making them people.
Which is making them people. But again, you know, if we want to talk about Power, the television show, as something that is new and different, I don't know that it is that new and different. I don't know that what I'm doing is breaking any rules or breaking necessarily new ground. But what I will say is that the fact that we even have to have these conversations is super boring, because in 2015 we shouldn't have to have them.
Well, we shouldn't, but the fact is these conditions still exist.
100%. And when people say, well, you're the only black woman running a television show in premium cable, at the time, yes. Right now, yes, I am. Okay, I think so. I mean, there are people who might be in development. That's important.
So to me, I think it's exciting because, and maybe it's boring to you because you hear about it so much, but trust me, the people I talk to about this show and talk to my sisters about it, there is a level of excitement that comes from just seeing people of color as, if you pardon expression, avatars.
Of course, it's the Supremes on Ed Sullivan. I always say that to people. It's the Supremes on Ed Sullivan. On some level, there is, Mom, we're on TV. Come, that happens. That is real. That's a real thing. The thing that's exciting to me is, I'm on Twitter. I have a very active social media presence on the nights that we do the show, or we show the episodes. And many of my fans, not Omari's fans or whatever, but my fans are young, aspiring black television, showrunners, people who want to write TV. That's exciting to me. They're exciting to me. That is what turns me on, is kids, people in their 20s who want to do this, and they see me and they go, oh, I can do it. Because there wasn't anybody for me to look at that age. When I was younger, at least I didn't know them. Now I'm friends with Yvette Lee Bowser, who ran Living Single. I count her as a mentor and a friend. Yvette was blazing this trail. She's very exciting to me in that same way. But I feel like I have benefited from her, and maybe I can help and benefit others.
Because that's a funny thing, because I just recently did a Q&A with Queen Latifah for Bessie, and we were talking, and I said, well, Living Single was the first Friends. Mm-hmm. And she told me, she said, the head of NBC said, we didn't get your show, so we did our version of it.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, a version of it where there were absolutely no black people in New York. I find that incredible.
Because if you go into a club like that, that's what that club's going to look like.
And that is my point. I am so in love with New York. I have such a love affair with New York. New York is absolutely one of the characters of the show. And I wanted to show New York as it is, which is part of the reason there's so much Spanish in the show, because that's what you hear on the street. I just wanted it to be real, and I'm very fortunate because Starz lets me do that. I'll tell you a quick story.
Sure. When
I was pitching this show, it was another studio that it was at. It was not Starz is the studio on the show now, but it was at another studio. And the foreign sales office from that studio said, it has a black lead, so we will not be able to sell the show overseas. We are in 175 countries now. They were wrong. It happens. They were wrong. That's 3 years ago. Do you know what I'm saying? The cynicism that people have about what a show with people of color can do has got to go out the window. I mean,
that's why we're still talking about this.
Exactly.
Because that, again, if you want to call it inertia or institutionalized or overt, whatever you want to call it, it's still there.
Yeah, exactly. So, it's still there, but it's like it's holding on despite itself. You know what I mean?
Long past its prime.
Yeah, long past its prime. I think that this show, if everyone were white on the show, would still be good. It would just be different. And I think that's the point. I don't think any of these characters do anything that they're doing because they are black or Latino. They do it because they're American.
Yes, the dangers of America. It's the Great Gatsby, even.
It is the Great Gatsby, by the way. That's my favorite book. That and Another Country, and this is so much the Great Gatsby.
Well, we're to come back to go through some of the other points of reference for the show. We're out of time. Courtney, I can't thank you enough for doing this.
No problem. This is great.
My pleasure to have you here. Our guest is Courtney Kemp Agboh. She's the creator and the executive producer of Power in its second season, just been picked up for its third season. The show is recorded at NPR West by Leo De Lagula. It's mixed by Kat Yora. It's edited, and she's going to have a hard time cutting this bad boy down by associate producer Blake Wright. I'm Elvis Mitchell. It's The Treatment. To catch up on past episodes of The Treatment, go to KCRW.com or listen on your smartphone with KCRW's mobile apps, or subscribe to the podcast on iTunes, Stitcher, or wherever you listen to podcasts. The Treatment is produced and distributed by KCRW Santa Monica.